From the very first night, something felt wrong in the mansion. The walls were too quiet. The air was too cold. And in the shadowy corners of the child's bedroom, the kind of silence lived that makes a person's heartbeat quicken without knowing why. The new nanny, a soft-spoken woman named Mira, felt that strange heaviness the moment she stepped inside. She watched the frail little girl on the bed, pale cheeks, trembling breaths, eyes too tired for someone so young, and she knew instantly that this wasn't normal illness. Fear clung to the child like a second skin, and in her small hands, she clutched a stuffed rabbit as though it was the only thing standing between her and something unseen. That night, when Mira gently tucked her in, she felt tiny fingers latch onto her wrist, as if silently begging her not to leave. Something, whatever it was, had stolen the peace from this house long before she arrived. But Mira didn't yet know how terrifying the truth would be, or how deeply it would change all of their lives forever. Before we go deeper into this emotional journey, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to channel name if you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. Mira hadn't always been a nanny. Life had dealt her its own harsh blows, loss, heartbreak, years spent trying to rebuild herself from nothing. The job was meant to be a new beginning, one that offered stability after months of uncertainty. But from the moment she entered the millionaire Arthur Hale's estate, she sensed pain woven into its foundations. The marble floors were polished, the chandeliers immaculate, the garden trimmed with perfection, yet none of it felt alive. It was a home, but not a happy one. Arthur Hale was a man with more wealth than he could ever spend, yet he carried the expression of someone who was losing everything. His daughter, Lila, had been sick for nearly a year. No doctor had answers. No medicine brought relief. Some nights she woke screaming. Other nights she slept with her eyes half open, as if she feared closing them entirely. Rumors among the staff whispered that the child's mother, who had passed away unexpectedly, had loved this room more than any other, and that grief had clung to the child since her death. But Mira had worked with children long enough to know when fear, not illness, was the true enemy. The first few nights were an eerie routine. Lila barely spoke. Her breaths were shallow. Her body trembled at the slightest noise. The mansion creaked at odd hours, the kind of creaks that felt too heavy to be from the wind. Mira often sat beside her bed long after midnight, watching the girl fight sleep, her eyes darting toward the narrow dark space beneath the bed. When she asked if something frightened her, Lila only shook her head weakly, pressing that stuffed rabbit closer to her chest. The child's silence said more than words could. And every morning, new symptoms appeared, fevers that spiked before dawn, trembling hands, dark circles beneath her eyes. No diagnosis ever matched. No explanation made sense. But the way she flinched at shadows made something inside Mira ache. Children didn't fear darkness unless the darkness had given them a reason. Outside the room, the household functioned like clockwork, yet every worker avoided the east wing after sunset. Nobody spoke of why. Mira watched their eyes shift away, their voices lower, their steps quicken when Lila's bedroom hall came into view. She realized then that this house held secrets, ones buried beneath wealth and silence. But she stayed. For the child. Something in her refused to abandon a little girl who looked like she hadn't felt safe in months. So she fought her own exhaustion, stayed by Lila's side through the long nights, humming soft melodies until the girl's breathing eased. Each day she grew more attached, feeling a protective instinct she thought she had lost long ago. It wasn't just a job anymore. It was a responsibility she felt deep in her bones. One night, close to 3 a.m., Mira woke to the sound of soft, stifled crying. She rushed into Lila's room and found her curled into a ball, clutching her rabbit with trembling fingers. Her skin was ice cold. Her eyes were filled with terror, not pain, not nightmares, real, living terror. And this time, Lila wasn't looking at the ceiling, or the shadows on the wall. She was staring directly at the narrow darkness beneath her bed. The kind of stare that makes the world stop. The kind that speaks of something unspeakable. Mira knelt beside her, pulling the shaking child into her arms, whispering comfort she wasn't sure she could provide. But Lila's breaths only grew sharper. Her eyes never left that space under the bed. It was then, in that chilling silence, that Mira understood, whatever was harming this child wasn't inside her body. It was inside her room. For nights after that, Mira barely slept. She sat awake, watching, waiting, listening. The creaking beneath the bed became more noticeable. The air grew colder. Sometimes, she felt the floor vibrate softly, as though something moved beneath the wooden planks. And on the worst nights, she heard soft scratching, too deliberate to be imagination. Too real to dismiss. Still, she said nothing to Arthur Hale. He was a man drowning in grief, clinging to medical explanations because they were easier than facing the unknown. He needed answers, but Mira needed truth. And the truth was hiding where no one had dared to look. On a storm-heavy night, when thunder shook the windows and rain hammered the glass, Lila fell into a fever so intense Mira feared she'd lose her. The child's breathing became shallow, her skin burning hot. She whispered one trembling sentence, a sentence that shattered Mira, "Please don't let it take me." Mira froze. The words crawled under her skin. The storm outside roared louder, as if echoing the fear inside the room. Mira, heart pounding, finally made the decision that had been building for nights. She had to look under the bed. Every instinct inside her screamed against it. Fear prickled across her skin. But she was done letting shadows haunt this child. Taking a deep breath, she gently laid Lila down, grabbed her phone for a dim light, and slowly sank to her knees. The storm's rumble faded behind the thundering of her heartbeat. The space beneath the bed seemed impossibly dark, as if light itself refused to enter. For a moment, she hesitated, the fear almost paralyzing. And then she lifted the blanket's edge and lowered the light. What she saw made her gasp, and nearly drop the phone. There were objects under the bed. Dozens of them. Small, familiar, heartbreaking objects. Lila's toys. Her books. Her drawings. Her missing clothes. But they weren't scattered, they were arranged. Carefully. Intentionally. Like little shrines. And in the center of it all was a framed photo, a photo of Lila and her mother, marked with deep, uneven scratches. The wood beneath the bed was torn. Splintered. As if something had been crawling in and out for months. Something, or someone. Myra's breath caught. Suddenly the pieces clicked, the fear, the illness, the missing items, the scratching sounds, the cold air, the mother's old bedroom. Everything. And before panic could root her in place, she heard it. A slow, dragging inhale behind the wall. Followed by footsteps, small, uneven, inside the crawlspace. Someone had been living inside the walls of the mansion. Her blood ran cold. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed Lila, and held her close. With her heart racing, she fled the room and locked the door behind them, running through the hallway with the trembling child in her arms. For the first time, she saw the staff's terror reflected perfectly in her own. Arthur Hale met them halfway down the hall, confused and alarmed, and when Mira told him what she found, his face drained of all color. The police were called immediately. But when they broke into the crawlspace behind Lila's wall, what they discovered was even more chilling. Nestled inside the narrow darkness, surrounded by blankets and snacks taken from the kitchen, was Arthur's estranged brother, mentally unstable, deeply disturbed, and obsessed with the deceased mother. He had returned after years, hiding inside the home, convinced that the child still belonged to him. His presence, his movements, his whispers in the night, those were what made Lila sick with fear, not disease. He had stolen her belongings, damaged her mother's picture, and crept beneath her bed to watch her sleep. And the house, out of loyalty or fear,